My name's Leon. I'm hearing the president's orders and... that went well.
Remakes are now an inevitability in the modern gaming industry. At one point, remakes were reserved for popular games that were good at the time, but aged like 90s television sitcoms. They were great when they came out, but unless you grew up with it or dig old game aesthetics, they're kinda hard to go back to. But now that aspect doesn't even matter. If any given game is popular enough, it'll be remade eventually, no matter how accessible it is to a modern audience. Games like Dead Space, The Last of Us, and the subject of today's video, Resident Evil 4. Capcom has had a pretty good track record as of late, re-releasing classic games, revitalizing their top franchises, and, at least with Resident Evil, some top-tier remakes. 2002's Resident Evil Remake, to me, is the swan song of classic survival horror games. I know Resident Evil 0 came out after that, but that game wasn't that good. It took what established the genre and turned it into the best possible version of Resident Evil 1. It's one of the greatest games of all time. In the same vein, 2019's Resident Evil 2 Remake is a love letter to the arguably better sequel to Resident Evil and basically made the game that everyone felt like they were playing back in 1998. In 2020's Resident Evil 3 Remake, quite divisive in the fan community, it did deviate a little far from the original Resident Evil 3, but I still feel like it was a good game. It's like if they made Resident Evil 3 in a world where only the remake timeline exists. So where to go next? Remake Code Veronica, since that was originally going to be Resident Evil 3? Maybe another remake of Resident Evil 1 with the modern fidelity and gameplay of the recent Resident Evil remakes. Or maybe do the more financially viable option and remake the most popular one. 2005's Resident Evil 4 was a landmark title for the franchise and re-revolutionized the whole survival horror genre, for better or for worse. It's one of the best action games ever made, which may not be exactly what you'd want out of a survival horror series, but so many games took after RE4 after it came out, not to mention how many times this only for GameCube game has been remastered and re-released throughout the years. It's pretty obvious that Resident Evil 4, to many, is the pinnacle of the whole Resident Evil franchise. So why not remake it? Yeah, it doesn't need it by any means, especially since the original is already available on all modern platforms. But Resident Evil 4 isn't perfect, and there are a few things that could be tweaked in both the story and pacing of the levels. And there's a guarantee it'll sell like hotcakes because come on, it's Resident Evil 4, who wouldn't want to play it? Well, here we are, 2023's Resident Evil 4 Remake. This game is amazing. 11 out of 10, exactly what a remake should be. It's really weird too, before the game came out I was excited, but still had the vibe of this doesn't really need to exist right now. After I played the Chainsaw demo, I felt a little more reassured that it will indeed be an improvement over the original, but after actually playing it, my God, this game's amazing. And the reason why comes down to a clear love for the original and a team that knew how to improve something that was considered a next-gen game on current-gen hardware when it came out.
Oh, what's the car? Wouldn't want to get a parking ticket.
So much for helping me.
The plot of Resident Evil 4 Remake is exactly the same as it was before. A returning Leon S. Kennedy is tasked with locating and rescuing the President of the United States' daughter, Ashley Graham, whom of which is somewhere in a rural town somewhere in quote-unquote Europe. They all speak Spanish there, so I guess it's in like Spain or something, I don't know. All the story beats are the same as well. Pretty much every major sequence of events from the original game come back here in some way, save for a few minor segments and scenes that didn't really add much to the experience as a whole. What they did here better than the original, however, is sort of fix the characterization of these characters. That's not to say there was anything wrong with the way everyone was in the original game, but in Remake it feels like the characters are fully realized in their roles. Let's take Louise for example. The mysterious other outsider that's also trying to escape but clearly knows more than he lets on and feels the need to help Leon and Ashley when they get infected with the Plaga. He doesn't get a whole lot of screen time in the original game, but when he does, he's a treat, but he seems to trust Leon a little too quickly for what kind of role he played in the game's backstory. Not to mention how Leon never at any point reacts or questions Louise about his role either. But in Remake, we actually get to see a more shady, untrusting Louise, and Leon actually gets to confront Louise this time around. Every character gets a little bit more of what they really should be. Salazar comes off way more maniacal and uncaring, Mendez and the rest of the villagers are hopelessly devoted to their religion, and Sadler actually acts like a cult leader and sees himself like a god this time around. I did like in the original that it was pretty clear he was using the cult as a means to an end, but I also really like seeing Sadler actually believe in the crap that he's preaching to everyone. It's like seeing a more serious take on Resident Evil 4's story. Now that may sound a little worrying to fans of the original since Resident Evil 4's campy nature is 75% of its identity. Don't worry though, Leon is still spouting out one-liners and puns like it's part of his job.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Leon sees an interesting shift in tone with this remake too. He still cracks jokes, yes, but he's still clearly traumatized by the events of Resident Evil 2, so it comes off more like a coping mechanism for the situation he's in. But he's still got that same charm that he had in Resident Evil 2 Remake, albeit with a little bit more confidence behind his voice now. Ashley has also improved a ton in my opinion. While I'm one of the few that didn't hate her in the original game, I do appreciate her actually acting like a young adult who has never had to run for her life before. And she also gains confidence as the game progresses and even helps out Leon in certain situations. It's character changes like these that make the plot flow so much smoother than it did in than the original game. Between character motivations being refined and characterizations being more fitting to the situation, I can't say every character gets it perfectly, however. Krauser is just okay in this game, not much better or worse than before, though his voice is a little too try-hard, I guess?
Long time no see, rookie.
But his boss fight is significantly improved with a new gameplay style, I will say that. And Ada, oh Ada. I don't really hate the sound of her voice by any means, it's the delivery that kills it for me.
You don't seem surprised. Interesting.
She comes off as bored or disinterested, whereas before she was always coy and clearly knew more than she let on. She has just about as much screen time as she did before, so it's not game ruining, just the only smear on what is otherwise, in my opinion, an upgrade to the characters and plot. This remake makes the original game feel like a film they made about these events, making Remake feel more like what actually occurred on Leon's mission. The gameplay also sees an upgrade. Whereas Resident Evil 2 Remake felt like a natural combination of Resident Evil 4's new style gameplay and the original survival horror level and enemy design, Resident Evil 4 Remake feels like what they were building up to ever since they remade Resident Evil 2. The same mechanics from the original game are here, but with a fast and free-feeling aiming system that allows you to move while aiming and swap weapons on the fly. There's crouching and stealth kills now, so there's sort of a sneaking mode in this game, though you cannot stealth this game. To compensate though, the enemies feel a little bit more aggressive and resistant than they did before, but you now have the ability to parry enemy attacks with your knife so you take no damage. And if you time it right, you can get a perfect parry, which not only negates any damage, but will also net you a staggered enemy as well. Now, because this is a pretty powerful system, your knife now degrades over time and can break, which means you'll have to get it repaired. You can find other less powerful knives that break really quickly, but you could always just upgrade your combat knife so it doesn't break as fast. Later down the line, my knife almost never broke, so it was a worthy investment. Besides, you can parry the freaking bosses too, and it looks and feels so satisfying. The bosses here are tweaked for the new gameplay style too, a lot more fast-paced than the original, just like the enemies. The only boss that was cut to my knowledge was the weird U3 boss, which, let's be honest, that was the weakest part of Resident Evil 4. And of course, we still have treasures to find with the ability to inlay gems to get more money out of them to sell to the merchant. And the merchant, oh man, in my opinion, he's so much more fun in this game. He's a lot more cartoony and comes off like he just genuinely wants to offer a service to Leon.
Molding a weapon to suit your specific needs. It's a thing of beauty, isn't it?
He also offers bonus challenges that will net you spinal gems from the original game, which are now a new currency all their own. You can trade them for all sorts of unique items, weapons, weapon mods, gems, even new attaché cases. Speaking of, the attaché case is back in full swing, now offering the ability to equip different types of attaché cases for different drop rates, as well as keychains you can hang off the case for other benefits. You get these by going to the shooting range, which has gotten a full upgrade all its own. It's got this fun pirate theme, and the merchant is just cheering you on the whole time. It's so fun.
I'm speechless.
All the keychains are models from the original game, which I thought was a really cute touch. You obtain them in this gacha machine, so expect to see a lot of villagers before you get an Ashley or a Leon. But I do have to say, seeing the previous models makes me appreciate this game's graphical quality that much more. Look at this game! I thought Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake looked awesome, but this? This feels like a true next-gen title. I'm playing the PS5 version in performance mode here, and it's just jaw-dropping how good this game looks. If I had to nitpick just a little, I guess one of my complaints from the original game was that the soundtrack wasn't really that memorable, save for the save room theme or a few of the battle tracks. The same applies here. All the music fits for sure, and it sounds great, but nothing that standout-ish. Except for that Spanish music at the start. And that Spanish music in the shooting range. As I make this video, the Mercenaries DLC isn't out yet, but it's set to come out on April 7th for free, so you bet I'm going to spend way too much time playing that mode. Separate Ways isn't included either, and currently there's no talk of it, but you think they aren't going to make that an assignment Ada? Come on, it's Resident Evil 4, of course they will pump this game with more content. As for whether or not those will be paid DLC, we will see. The game's already chock full of content as it is. There's the unlockable professional difficulty, as well as tons of unlockables from cosmetics, extra weapons, and models of you. There is already some paid DLC available, just some costumes, filters, extra weapons, expanded treasure map, and the original game's BGM and sound effects. Not needed, but it's nice if you like that kind of stuff. If the Mercenaries was already included, I'd say it's a must-buy. But since it's not, I'll say it'll be a must-buy on April 7th, cause man, this game is amazing. We really did not need this game. Code Veronica was originally Resident Evil 3, and it isn't very good, so it would have been more deserving of a remake. But Resident Evil 4 Remake feels like the remake we would have gotten if we had already gotten the Code Veronica remake. It's like we skipped ahead. Now that we have Resident Evil 4 Remake, I have a hard time saying that it wasn't worth it. It may not be necessary, but man am I glad we have it. I'll definitely be putting tons of hours into this game, and if you haven't played it yet, then do yourself a favor and pick this game up. What are you waiting for, stranger?
I see you have an eye for things. Gun's not just about shooting, it's about reloading. You'll know what I'm talking about.